Hi, Andy XL, back with the eighth of my State of the Franchise addresses for each of the 32 NFL teams. And time to look at the eighth worst team on paper from last season, the New Orleans Saints. Now, most Saints fans have very low expectations for the 2025 season. I actually felt more optimistic seeing them as having an outside chance of making the postseason. The final truth is that they finished somewhere between the two, finishing 25th in the final league standings. Part of my thinking was that they were in what looked like one of the weaker divisions in the NFL, the NFC South. And that will be the case again in 2026 in all likelihood. So, can the Saints improve on their 2025 showing? And what would it take for them to improve their roster going into the next campaign? Well, let's start at quarterback. The Saints went into the 2025 season with Spencer Rattler as their starting quarterback before letting rookie Tyler Shugg take the reins for the second half of the season. Shugg made a modest start in his new role, but his final four games were his best efforts and have almost certainly secured the starting role for week one of the 2026 season and possibly longer term, depending how he performs, of course. Shugg's performance has probably negated any need at quarterback this off-season for the Saints. At running back, Alvin Kamara barely made an appearance in the final 7 games of the season. Whilst he is under contract with the Saints for 2026, it appeared his time in New Orleans may be at an end, but he is apparently not thinking that way. Kamara still led the Saints in yardage among the running backs last season. Devon Neal led them in touchdowns, whilst Kendre Miller and Aldrich Stevenson also played a role out of the backfield. The Saints have a poor salary cap position. They're actually in negative territory, so they need to create cap space. And Kamara would incur a significant cap hit of 18 million. So it's possible that all four of these running backs who are under contract for 2026 may be back, and they may well them all compete for work next season, meaning they may well not look for a running back this off season. If they were to swallow the cap hit and find a way to do so on Kamara, that may indicate they will go after a running back early in the 2026 draft. Now they have picks in rounds 1, 2, and 3, and then they don't have their not ordinarily fourth round pick, but they do have two late in round 4 and one in early in round 5. So they've got three within about 20 picks at the end of round 4, start of round 5. So they've got some draft capital to use there. At wide receiver, the Saints let both Rashid Shaheed and Brandon Cooks leave during last season, which pretty much left them with just Chris Olave and Devon Vele as their only wide receivers. Olave will enter the last year of his rookie deal in 2026, so if the Saints can find a way to find cap space to secure him on a longer term deal, they really need to. But the Saints surely have to add help here, probably in need of at least two additions at wide receiver. And given their capital difficulties, the draft appears to be their most likely source of those additions. At tight end, Jawan Johnson had the best year of his career in 2025 with 889 yards and 3 touchdowns, so he will continue as the Saints' primary tight end in 2026. Swiss Army knife veteran Taysom Hill and Foster Moreau are now free agents. If the Saints bring neither back, they will need to add a backup for Johnson. The offensive line, the Saints O line are now 49 sacks of their quarterback, and with Saints running game ranking 27th in the league, this is an area where they need to find improvement next season. Guard Dylan Radun struggled and is now a free agent, and right tackle Talois Fuaga was ranked 53rd of 89 tackles by PFF for last season, so that could be another slot they look to upgrade. The other 3 O line starters all graded well as pass protectors, but not well as run blockers. So the left guard in particular may need to be a dominant presence in the run game. So there's plenty of work to do on the O line. At defensive tackle, teams ran against the Saints plenty last season, but despite that, the Saints' run defense stood up well in that regard, ranking 19th for yardage conceded and 6th for rushing touchdowns conceded. But none of Brian Bresset, Nathan Shepard, or Devon Godchaux had particularly strong seasons individually. Losing last year's third-round draft pick Vernon Broughton in week 2 was a loss here. With all four of those named under contract for next season, I can see the Saints saying what they have is good enough, but also possible they go back to the draft for a defensive tackle again in 2026. Excuse me. On the edge, the Saints had a pretty decent pass rush last season with Cam Jordan, Chase Young, and Carl Granderson recording 26 and a half of the Saints' 44 sacks for the season. Young had 10 despite missing 5 games, so maybe 15 is more like you might expect from him. Jordan is a 36-year-old free agent, but has indicated he is open to re-signing. If he does, the Saints will once again have a good pass rushing unit. If you don't bring him back, they may need to replace him. But with Chris Rumph also hitting free agency, they have the option to add a long-term successor for Jordan via the draft. Inside linebacker Pete Werner and 36-year-old Demario Davis were the Saints' starting inside linebackers last term. Davis is another aging free agent. Um, so, as with Cam Jordan, the Saints have a call to make regarding bringing him back. They did draft Danny Stutzman in last year's draft, so maybe he will be seen as the successor to Davis long term. If not, they may take an inside linebacker in this draft, regardless of whether Davis returns. At safety, the Saints signed veteran Julian Blackman last off-season, but he got hurt in the first game of the season and did not appear again last season. He has reportedly signed an extension that takes him through 2026, though. In Blackman's absence, Jonas Sanka was pressed into being the starter alongside Justin Reed. That pair did okay for the Saints, and with Blackman hopefully back in action next season, the Saints seem unlikely to seek to make any moves for a safety. At cornerback, the Saints look okay in terms of pass rush and at safety, as I've said, and as their pass defense ranked ninth in the league, they must have been decent at cornerback too. Alontae Taylor, Quincy Riley, and Kool-Aid McKinstry were the starters. Riley and McKinstry were both second-year players, so they should serve the Saints well going forward. Taylor's the free agent, though, and the Saints' cap situation may make it tricky to bring him back. If he's not back, they need to replace him for sure. On special teams, Blake Groupie lost the kicking duties during the season. Charlie Smythe probably did well enough in the final 6 games of the season to retain the role, although it's no certainty going into 2026. Kai Kroger was one of the least effective punters last season, so his hold on that spot maybe not be as secure by any means. Both are signed up for the next 2 seasons if the Saints want to stick with them, though, but I suspect there might be a change or two there. So, in summary, in the NFC South, that was one with a sub 500 record in 2025. It would not take a lot of improvement for the Saints to contend to win that division next season. Firstly, they need Tyler Shugg to continue to develop and improve in his second season, and certainly not to regress as teams get the opportunity to work out his tendencies and how to exploit any weaknesses that come to light. In terms of actions they need to make this off-season, these are the ones they need to prioritise. Add 2 wide receivers, add 2 at least O-linemen, preferably those that are good run blockers, re-sign Cam Jordan and Demario Davis, draft an edge guy and possibly an inside linebacker as their long-term successors, and re-sign or replace Alontae Taylor. The basis of a good defense is in place. They just need to retain the key parts and make a plan for replacing the aging vets like Jordan and Davis. But it is the offense that needs to show big improvement next season. Improving the O-line's run blocking and then getting better production from their right running backs will be an important step they need to take. But Shug playing well and being given a much improved wide receiver group to work with is probably the biggest requirement if the Saints are to challenge to win the division next season. So there's not a lot of work there for the Saints to do, and the window of opportunity in that division is there for them to exploit. But it's another team where they need to make the right moves, and making the right judgment calls on those aging veterans is going to be key. And obviously, if they bring in 2 wide receivers, if they both come from the draft, they pretty much need both of them to be first-year successes. So some ifs and buts there, but there is a chance for the Saints to be much more competitive next season. So that's it for the Saints. Next one up is, I can't believe I'm doing them as the 9th worst team in the NFL, the Kansas City Chiefs, and they'll be followed by the Cincinnati Bengals. Right, who expected that at the beginning of last season? Well, that's where we are. They'll be the next 2 I cover. See you soon.